I held my 3-year-old son, Jamie, on my left hip. Next to me was my energetic 5-year-old son, Max, clutching his backpack and our wheelie suitcase. My belly was beginning to swell with my third pregnancy. Max had taken off his shoes and dropped them into the bins. I was a pro at managing life with a toddler on my hip. We were at London Heathrow Airport in 2009, standing barefoot at security, ready to walk through the scanner. "Madam," said the security agent. They call you madam, not ma'am in England. "Your child needs to remove his shoes," gesturing at Jamie. I took a deep breath. I knew what was about to happen. "Please, sir, they're just soft little leather booties. Can't we do the chemical white thing instead?" "No, they must come off." It was 7 a.m., a sweltering British summer morning. We'd already been in line for 90 minutes. Travellers all around us were weary. Families, couples, everyone eager to get through security and onto beaches, beer, sunshine. I pulled off Jamie's little navy blue leather booties with green dinosaurs, placed him on the ground, and prepared to walk through. And just as I knew he would, Jamie had a full body, soul deep toddler meltdown. Everyone turned to stare or looked studiously away, full of pity, discomfort, irritation. Max and I scrambled. We repacked the liquids, the portable DVD player. It was chaotic. It was stressful. And that's when I heard it. An older man, stone-faced, bitter-looking, stared at Jamie and then at me. "You shouldn't be here if you can't control him." I felt a surge rise deep within me. I picked up Jamie, pulled him tight onto my left hip, walked towards this man, rolled my shoulders back, embodied my full 5'10", looked him dead in the eye. "You have no idea why my son reacted that way." I stabbed my finger into his chest. He spent the last 11 months of his life being held down for cancer treatments. He's been poked, cut open, and inside by chemotherapy. Every time someone touches his shoes or clothes, he thinks he's about to be stabbed again. He even bathes in a shirt so he doesn't have to see the scars all over his body. How dare you? The man flinched, but did not soften. His contempt remained. "If you don't want to be around children, don't come to Heathrow Airport in the summer." A security guard rushed over. Jamie clung to me silently. Max quietly tied up his sneakers. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. We gathered our things and walked away, me, my 2 sons, and my unborn child, all silent. And here's what I realized in that moment. First, I felt shame. I'd reacted from pure instinct, from my survival brain, not my wise mind. I'd let anger flood my nervous system, and my unborn child had received that flood too. I wasn't managing my mind. I was being managed by my fear and my rage. Second, I felt pride. Even if imperfectly, I'd stood up for my son, and I'd advocated fiercely for his unseen wounds. Third, I knew that I wanted to live differently. I needed to train my mind differently. This wasn't about controlling my emotions. It was about learning to notice them, manage them, and choose my response. So mindset management is not just a tool. I believe it to be a survival skill. In the world we occupy, where it's increasingly more digital, where misunderstandings are constant and stress is contagious, and where judgment is often easier than compassion, managing your mindset is your true power. Because how you manage your mind determines how you manage your communication, and how you manage your communication determines the reality that you create in your family, your career, as a leader in your life. So let's define communication. Communication is a process by which information is exchanged through a common system of symbols or behaviors. It isn't just words, right? A smile could say, "I'm happy to help." Crossed arms and a flat tone might send the opposite message. Eye contact can be seen as a sign of respect in one culture and a challenge in the other. I learned things like that by traveling. When I visited Japan for the first time, I discovered that tipping in a restaurant was considered incredibly offensive. Living in the US, it's offensive not to tip, right? So communication is shaped by many factors. The first is mindset. So what do I mean by mindset? Mindset is a collection of thoughts and beliefs that shape your attitudes, your habits, and your disposition. So I like to think of mindset as mental habits. Mindset comes from three key places: our origins, the family we grew up in. I grew up in 80s London with parents and grandparents who'd gone through World War II and rationing. So there are starving children in Africa, clean your plate, right? Origin, family, how I was brought up. Social cultural, if you live in a collectivist culture versus an individualistic culture, whether you live in a culture that has maternity leave or paternity leave, right? Sweden has had paternity leave for 50 years. In the US, we don't even have maternity leave. That's going to affect your mindset about having things like children and who's going to look after the children. Your personal experience, have you lost somebody? Did you graduate college? Did you serve in the armed forces? All of these things become even more nuanced when we factor in intersectionality. So in the digital world, there's often less context for communication. We may not have the same shared experiences. We may not be in the same physical environment. So it's crucial to get even more clarification and perhaps use more exaggerated smiles and emojis, right, to add context. So ultimately, your mindset shapes your perspective. It's almost like a lens, like a set of glasses you put on, which influence the symbols, the signs, and the behaviors that you use to communicate. So, to summarize, your family, your social cultural context, and your personal experiences shape your mindset, which in turn shape how you communicate in the digital and the real world. The second aspect of mindset that a lot of people are familiar with is the growth versus fixed, right? Fixed mindset, this belief that your skills are innate, that you can focus on problems, that focusing on problems and the negative, right? And there's a tendency to struggle with feedback, right? The tendency to avoid challenges, prefer the status quo. If you are somebody who falls into the growth mindset camp, your belief in your skills is that you can work to improve them, right? And optimists, who are a form of growth mindset people, outperform pessimists by 25 to 40% in sales. My mother used to call me Tigger, the high energy, bouncy, somewhat goofy tiger from Winnie the Pooh. And I was full of energy. I'd bump into the room. And this was my natural state, right? When I would walk into a room with my head down, she'd say, darling, are you feeling a bit Eeyore today? A little bit gloomy, right? So the point about this is we have a natural proclivity, but it's trainable. Marty Seligman and all the research done by Carol Dweck and Angela Duckworth on grit and flow and resilience and starts to show that we might have a natural tendency, but we can cultivate learned optimism or learned helplessness. So decades of research is showing us that we can create this shift. And if you go a little bit beyond that and take into this concept of neurosculpting, which is the idea that suffering doesn't create hopelessness. It's suffering that we think we can't control, right? If you're a Buddhist, you might be familiar with that concept. Neurosculpting is this idea that you can prune the neurological connections that you have in your brain towards the things that are going well, right? Evolutionarily, we always look to the negative, right? That's a survival mechanism, right? Then you can look at genes too. Dr. Bruce Lipton, Leslie Flowers posted his book. I had the privilege of having a conversation with him once, and we were talking about epigenetics and the extraordinary data that he's collecting that shows that adopted children actually end up creating and manifesting the conditions similar to their adoptive parents rather than their biological parents. So the power and influence of the environment you live in is huge, right? So what all of this is really is that your mindset is like a pair of glasses. And I like the Henry Ford quote here, right? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right? We believe what we think. Our mindset shapes our results, and it's in our hands, and it impacts our communication, right? So if you think you can, if you want to believe you can, if you want to take that choice back into your hands, you can impact the negative mindsets and the negative genetics that you might have, right? You can totally create a new world. So taking this one step further in terms of the world that we're currently living in, right? We live in an incredibly dynamic world of constant change. Eric Teller of Google X says that our world is changing faster than we are prepared for. Technology is evolving faster than our human brains can adapt to. So how do we handle this? My belief is that we must become conscious leaders of our inner world. So some researchers, some historians believe that in some ways our ability to adapt as humans is diminishing. And so if you look at some of the things that have come up, like suicide rate, natural disasters, pandemics, right? We find it very easy to think we're not going to make it, right? How are we going to get through it? So a framework that I really like is to look at this work by Dr. Danny Friedland from his book, Leading Well from Within, and connecting that to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The autonomic nervous system regulates about 90% of our internal processes, breathing, digestion, hormones, alertness. And when the autonomic nervous system is out of balance, we can't think, we can't be generative, we can't be creative because we're stuck in that survival mode, like I was in the airport. And what that leads us to is a place of downward spiral, right? Reactivity. Reactivity could also be stress, self-doubt, maybe even burnout, right? Depletion. When I use the word conscious, I'm just really meaning aware. When you're conscious, you're aware. Reactivity is mostly unconscious, right? So what I'm advocating for here is a move towards a place of thinking about consciously resourcing yourself. When you think about this relationship between resources and demands. So when you are in a place as a leader, and I believe that we're all leaders of our own lives, not just, the white man CEO of a company leader, right? I think we're all leaders in the different roles we embody. We're thinking about how we can step into creativity. So a nice way to think about this, as I alluded to, is the triune model, which was developed in the 60s by Paul MacLean. This particular model is quite a simplification, but it basically says we've got three key parts of the brain. We've got the brainstem, which developed first, and then we move up, and that's often called the reptilian brain. Then we've got the mammalian brain, or the limbic system, and then we've got the prefrontal cortex, the most evolved part of the brain. This is a really useful model when we're talking about reactivity and creativity, because it connects beautifully to Maslow's hierarchy. So if you ever did any Psych 101, you'll know the hierarchy of needs, right? So sort of simplified version is you've got basic needs on the bottom, you've got love and belonging in the middle, and then you've got significance on the top, right? So Dr. Danny Friedland connected these two. In the triune model, there are the three areas of the brain, the reptilian, the mammalian, and the neocortex. So the reptilian part evolved first. This is our least evolved part of our brain. If you connect that to the bottom, that's the part of the brain that's involved with safety. If we don't feel safe, we can't do well in the world, right? We can't learn, we can't do any of this. Then you go to the next layer of the brain, which is in the Maslow's hierarchy, it's a sort of love and belonging, right? Connection, right? This is connected to the mammalian brain. And this is really important when we think about social behaviors, how we show up, right? Social emotional contagion refers to the way that we spread emotions and behaviors amongst our groups. Then if we look at the most evolved part of the brain, we're looking at the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex, and that connects to the top of the brain, right? Significance or self-actualization. And this is really about the area of the brain that's involved with inhibiting our reactivity, empathy, insights. The kicker, though, is that only about 8% of our brain's neurons are in the prefrontal cortex, which means the majority of our brain, the majority of our neurological connections are in the reactive reptilian and mammalian brains. So if we think about this connection between the triune brain and Maslow's hierarchy, and that we're in this constant struggle, right, to move up, but we're fighting the fact that the majority of our brain evolved to keep us safe, and reactivity is about keeping us safe. How do we manage that demands versus resource? How do we step into a place where, when we move into that downward spiral of stress and reactivity, we react like I did in the airport? How do we navigate our relationships, right? When we step into fear and survival, We are not conscious leaders. So for me, mindfulness is the most perfect tool for this, right? Mindfulness is incredible. It brings you present and aware. It manages emotions, reduces stress, lowers your blood pressure. It's also anti-aging. It actually lengthens the telomeres at the end of your DNA. So, who needs Botox when you can meditate? That's my view. I'm like, meditation instead of Botox, right? The ultimate biohack, to use a very bro term, right? So in a world of distractions, I believe mindfulness to be a secret weapon to staying grounded. Because when you manage your mind and you play with the gap between stimulus and response, right? And you manage your communication. For me, meditation, mindfulness practice is really about playing with that gap that Viktor Frankl identified, the freedom and choice in that gap between stimulus and response. When you can manage that, it determines how you manage your mind. When you manage your mind, it changes how you manage your communication with yourself and with your world. And how you manage your communication determines the reality you create. Speaking of distractions, who just texted me? Sorry, that's cheesy. So that's my very complicated, but hopefully not too complicated to follow along, frame of communication, the mindset underneath, and a tool that I love.